And as the National Executive Committee of the APC meets on Wednesday, reports indicate that the Executive Committee of the main opposition People's Democratic Party will also meet this week. Ahead of that meeting, there are strong indications that the PDP has settled for indirect primary to pick its presidential candidate. It is reported that President Muhammadu Buhari has also approved the indirect primary for the APC, as our correspondent Indi Amugo has just told us. Well, as it appears, the consensus option may not be realistic. Will both parties go the indirect primaries route? We have in the studio with us tonight Arise News analyst Abiodun Adeniyi. And in our off-site studio is Arise Director of News and Political Editor Sumner Sambo. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. The clock is ticking. We're counting down days. And, of course, there's the timeline to meet. But politics is not just a game of numbers. It's also the game of influence. So we cannot erase those influential people, can we? Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, let me start with you. Can we take away the role of these influential people regardless of the mode of primaries we're going to see in the APC or the PDP?
Definitely. That's going to be the decider at the end of the day. The influence of the critical stakeholder will be the final factor that will crack the nut on who flies the APC presidential flag. And we know this very clearly. It doesn't matter whether it is direct, whether it is indirect, or whether it is consensus. Let's even agree that it is indirect. It gives a picture of some contestation. But within it, of course, will be some consensual approach where, the power brokers, the critical stakeholder, we arrive, covertly, overtly at a particular candidate that the system should overall favor. That's what I think will play out. So overall, at the end of the day, we might be having a kind of indirect consensus, even if they agree that it should be consensus primaries. Yeah.
That's some hybrid there. I wonder if Sumner will be able to help us understand what indirect consensus means. But the real question is, Sumner, how exactly do you think numerical strength of the regions, regarding the delegates, how will it determine who gets what?
Thank you so much, Ngozi. It's important for us to know that if you look at political trajectory, the Northwest has always had an overwhelming majority of delegates in all political parties whenever it comes to electing party candidates in one way or the other due to the population of that particular geopolitical zone. Now, the Northwest is going to be a decider because it's almost having like about close to 2,000 delegates out of 7,800 expected delegates at the APC National Convention, which would be a special national convention, by the way, to elect a presidential candidate. Now, the role that these geopolitical zones will play will go a long way to determine how the next candidate of the party will be. If you look at what happened at the Just Convention of the People's Democratic Party in 1998, when we had the likes of Alex Ekweme and then former President Olusegun Obasanjo, you understand that the intrigues that played out there is one that the northern groups eventually meshed together, and all former President Olusegun Obasanjo needed to do was just to get one part of the South, which is in his own part. He got support more from the South-South and then a bit from the Southwest that he came from, and it was easier for him to get one. If you look at the same thing in 1993, 92-93, when we had that Abiola primaries, it was almost the same thing. So the North-West geopolitical zone is always playing a critical role, then followed by the North-Central, and then the Southwest. So if you are able to get just one out of the remaining 3 geopolitical zones, either from the, in this instance, you get from the Southeast, or you get from the South-South, or you get from the Northeast, it becomes easier. But in all, out of 6 geopolitical zones, you need 4 to be able to emerge as a winner of the presidential primaries.
Okay, right. Professor Adeniyi, I mean, what does this mean for the aspirants that we have seen in the major opposition party that are canvassing for a consensus? You have the Southeastern Bloc, if you'd like, And then you have the Northern Bloc, where you have the likes of former President of the Senate, Dr. Sarah Key, the Governor of Bauchi State. On in the Southeastern Bloc, you have former Governor of Anambra State, Peter Obi, and the likes. What does this mean for them now that the PDP is likely to go with indirect primaries?
None of the APC, yeah. I think
both of them are allegedly going to go that way.
That's
yes.
fine, yeah. I agree that they keep watching themselves, and it's okay in the kind of atmosphere that we exist. But more importantly, it's good for us to observe that PDP has moved. They are getting over the zoning question now. They're talking about consensus, but it's also important to say that not all the aspirants agree with the idea of consensus. It's just about 2 or 3 of them pursuing this idea, and it's not likely to fly because we know that 1 or 2 candidates amongst them will definitely want indirect primary. But overall, at the end of the day, we expect that. In the case of the PDP, there will be some kind of fierceness, in the way they play out their process. We expect at the end of the day a repeat of, the past process, the past mechanism, where there will be inducement and all those things. It is still early in the day for us to expect that this thing will not play out. It will play out. It could come in different names, but we expect that this thing will play out. And the candidate with the heaviest war chest is likely to be the one, that will take the day. But it's not just limited to the PDP. Even the APC will reflect this as well. But what point are we making in all of this? Whatever is going to happen at the end of the day, let's just have a process that is smooth so that we can have them fulfill all the requirements of INEC in the build-up to the general elections.
Of course, Sumner, INEC's timetable gives June 3rd as the last date for both parties to actually, make a list and submit of their candidates. But let's talk about these numbers. The Southeast consistently has the lowest numbers, if I'm correct, of delegates. How will this affect or impact the call by the Southeast for the presidency, whether it's in the APC or the PDP? How is that likely to pan out?
Now, this is where negotiation actually comes in, because like you asked earlier on, the geopolitical zones actually have very, very strong weight. If you look at, for example, the APC primaries in 2014, where Muhammadu Buhari emerged as the winner, the very first presidential primaries that they had held, the person who came second in that presidential primaries is Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso, who comes from the northwest geopolitical zone. And those figures were because the votes were divided with President Buhari as at then. Now, if someone is coming from the Southeast, which has the lowest number of delegates, apart from the FCT, which is the nation's capital, now, you would have to lobby a lot of persons. You will need to have some of the top politicians. You will need to have some good dose of old political war horses. And in this instance, the way that someone from the Southeast can easily make a way through is for the presidency to back such a person, because we have heard that Chris Ngige is going to declare tomorrow. We have the likes of Dave Umahi. We have the likes of Rocha Sokorocha. Now, if we have all 3, 4, or 5 aspirants coming from the Southeast, it's going to divide their votes at the end of the day. So it's better for those who are coming from the Southeast to unite behind one particular aspirant, and then the particular aspirant gets to have the presidency behind him or her, and then all political war horses, it becomes much easier. But if 4 or 5 of them go into the race, I can tell you they won't make a headway.
Well, let me stay with you, Sumner, because, speaking for the ruling APC, let's flip that to the opposition PDP that is trying to make a comeback at a grab for power at the center. What is likely to play out there?
Well, at the PDP, it's going to be a usual situation, because the PDP has been used to indirect primaries right from time, the delegate system. And I can tell you that people like Atiku, they are masters of the game. They understand what each delegate wants. And I can tell you what happened in Port Harcourt last time is almost going to happen. And that's the fear among other presidential aspirants in the PDP, that Atiku is such a master of the delegate system that it will be a quick win for him once they adopt that. And that's why you must have heard some people going for consensus, because left alone, because Atiku has been in this race since 1992, he understands the political trajectory of most of the politicians that are in the game right now. It will be much more easier for him. And don't forget, there are fears also that Iyorchia Ayu, having been an associate of Atiku Abubakar in the past, working with him while he was vice president, that he will need he will easily pass some support across to his former boss. But it's left to be seen whether the PDP will create a fair ground for all aspirants. But what is at the heart of it right now is that reaching a consensus will be very difficult. And you can see Atiku being confident all the time, saying, let's go to the polls, let's go to the polls. It's because he knows that as far as the PDP is concerned, he understands several delegates, and many of the delegates understand him.
Okay, back to the studio here with Prof. Well, some think that with indirect mode, if that's the process of coming up with a presidency for the APC, that the odds actually stack up positively for Tinubu, for example. But what do you think really would deepen Nigeria's democracy in terms of whether it's consensus, indirect or direct? What will be the best thing for Nigeria going forward and deepening our democracy?
I think it's just to say that whatever method the parties are going to go with, should be properly done, because all the methods, all the mechanisms are legitimate in the first instance, whether direct, indirect, or consensus. They are all legitimate process. If they are all properly done, I think it's a welcome development. Democracy is about dialogue. It's about disagreeing and agreeing. It's about building understanding, and of course, all the processes are also about building understanding, either through the ballot box or through the round table. So what is important is for us to have a process that even if people are objecting to it, they have appropriate channels to voice their objection, and at the end of the day, it is seen to be properly resolved to the satisfaction of members or the stakeholders, as the case could be.
Yeah, but some argue that with direct primaries, that will be more inclusive for democracy as a whole. What do you think about that?
Direct primaries, of course, we know what it comes with. It can be very expensive, can be very cumbersome, can be very laborious, and of course, we know what our system is like. Those who are going to be participating are less sophisticated. They have marginal understanding. We can actually be problematic for those who are implementing or executing the process, as the case could be. So that's why largely the system runs away from it and chooses indirect primaries, irrespective of its own downside as well. So I think the methods are legitimate, as it were, but in saying that they are legitimate, we also need to perfect them, remembering that democracy is something that is gradual, processual, that we need to build through painstaking efforts, the sides of all stakeholders.
And so that's what I want to talk about, because it's legitimate, it's recognized by the Electoral Act, and even some parties recognize all these modes of primaries. But talking about the shortcomings for the indirect primaries, some people will argue that this tilts the power balance towards the executive, the elected executive in power, the governors, the president, who will produce this super delegates and delegates. What do you think?
Well, the delegate system is one that has always been very controversial, because those who are in power try to influence the number of delegates that are going in terms of former lawmakers, for example, serving lawmakers, serving party executives, and all of that. Now, the major challenge here, for example, in the APC, is that President Buhari is trying to run away from what will look like a booby trap of going to consensus, like it happened at the recent APC National Convention. Because if he goes with the idea of consensus into the presidential primaries and he builds a consensus around one person, like it happened with Abdullah Adamu, the tendency is that the oldest politicians, the old political war horses, will run away from supporting that particular candidate or preferred candidate by the president that's imposed on the party during the general election. So there's a fear that people like Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, if he doesn't get it and there's a build-up of consensus around someone that's not himself, he will run away out of the party, and whether he wins the ticket, the APC will need him. And if he loses the ticket, APC will still need him. So there's a way of trying of the president trying to make it look like it's the decision of delegates to give it to someone, not that the president backed someone. And I think, to be fair to President Buhari, that is just the right way, because he wouldn't be going to everywhere with the candidate that will emerge to campaign with him. If you know the president very well, once he is not on the ballot, he becomes very mild about it. Immediately he won his own presidential ticket. Most of the governors who were contesting in one way or the other, he almost left them in the lurch. So there is that fear, actually, that the system should be allowed to produce the candidate, and the best way is through that, delegate system. And I think it's good for the APC, because they tried the direct primaries in 2014 when the president came on. They tried the indirect in 2018. And now, why is the president not saying they should go for consensus?
Very good question, hanging in the air. Well, would it be good for the PDP? I mean, we heard Atiku Abubakar, Prof, when he was declaring for, well, his interest. He said, look, if he doesn't get the PDP ticket, you can kiss the PDP goodbye. Do you think really that's likely to happen? And what are the implications of him not getting the ticket? Prof?
That's me.
yes.
That's who is not
Prof. You. Adeniyi, you.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry, I thought you were referring to.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's well. There will be threats, and there will be fears, like Atiku, former Vice President Atiku is trying to sound. But I think overall, there's something that politicians usually do after major contests like these. They have a way of reconciling. They have a way of coming together and say, gentlemen, it is over. We have to come together, because what's important for us is to win the election. We remember what happened in 2019 in Port Harcourt. So many people, so many contestants were actually, they felt angry. They were angry that Atiku emerged in the first instance, but he went all the way, went for broke and tried to reconcile all the warring factions. And of course, at the end of the day, they came together. Yes, they were defeated at the end of the day, the general election, but it is important to note that they will always come together. There will always be reconciliation. It's a path they have always stood, and I don't see this being I don't see this case being different. All
right, back to Sumner. Let's quickly, we have less than 2 minutes. Of course, President Buhari has urged aspirants to woo delegates, but paint a picture of what's likely to happen if the PDP picks its flag bearer from the north and running mate from the south. What are the implications for the APC?
Well, the implication for the APC will be very, very strong, because the major fear of the APC is that throwing the ticket to the southern part of the country is one that would assuage the feelings of those in the south, but at the end of the day, there are fears in some quarters that it may also cost it the presidency. And so that's why you see some people are still weighing in. Even before now, some northerners had been saying that they will still throw in their hats into the ring, like former Zamfara State Governor Ahmed Yerima saying that, look, the North still stands a chance, because the APC is taking a very strong risk. If, for example, Tinubu comes out as a candidate of the party, where is he going to pick his vice presidential candidate from that will give him a winning opportunity? There are fears that if he picks someone who is a northern minority Christian, there may be a challenge. But there are some others who are saying that the APC is a national party. Even if it's a northern minority Christian that is picked, the APC should be able to rally around the structures to deliver that ticket. But there are fears that if the PDP does what you have just said, that the PDP will defeat the APC, because the APC is unable to present a ticket based on the tune of the country at the moment, which is for the fact that there should be that geopolitical balance, there should be that religious balance, and then, of course, putting someone on the ticket that's well acceptable by all Nigerians.
All the political intrigues. We'll keep our fingers crossed as it's becoming interesting. Well, I have to thank you both, gentlemen, Arise News analyst Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, and of course, Arise political editor Sumner Sambo, for helping us dissect and understand, party politics in Nigeria a bit better tonight. It's a conversation we'll keep having till the elections. Thank you.
Right.